And I'm going to whip through my slides because what I wanted to take the opportunity to do today was to say, just what we've realised through this process is how important education is. And with education, and with good education and a good education programme, you can get some really, really good results. And we are, like across New South Wales. And Joley's programme in Bega is particularly excellent, and it's getting some particularly good results. But there's still a lot of misconceptions or perceptions from the past around FOGO, and particularly within Sydney and the metro area. So the fact that it's happening in Melbourne now and it's happening in Adelaide in the metro areas, but also just a sort of, even though there are obvious differences between city living and multi-unit dwellings and all of the other elements of it, that education can really make a difference, and it's about the councils working with their communities and understanding their communities and how they work. So, and I won't repeat, there's some of these slides are, you may have heard before, particularly from Virginia, so I just really wanted to just put it in the context, the scope of what we've been doing here in New South Wales and what we've learned from that. Some interesting quirks about human behaviours that we've discovered through this programme and where we need to go from here, because even though you know, that's that old thing that, in fact, behaviour change is harder than rocket science. It really is. It's one of the hardest things we can possibly do. And so it's not easy, but there's a lot we don't know and there's a lot we can learn, but it can be done. And then to hand over to Joley, who's going to talk to you about her particular programme at Bega Valley. So that's our programme. It's been huge. We now have 70% of households with a service. It's because it's the right thing to do. It's a good thing to do. We've got a good, strong organics industry in New South Wales, and FOGO is a good option, and it's been very much taken up in the regions. We now, collection grants are open at the moment. What we did was provide funding of up to 1.3 million, and it was for the bins and the kitchen caddies and the equipment and the education. So there was up to $100,000 for education, and that was really important. They're open now. We're now looking to support funding for commercial collections, but also trials in multi-unit dwellings. And that's in recognition that there are particular challenges in multi-unit dwellings, and so a different approach is going to be needed. And then the last round, City of Sydney secured funding for up to 75,000 units and Randwick for 25,000 units. So we're going to have some evidence around more than 100,000 units, different types of unit blocks, different types of services that will help inform and improve the opportunities for that as we go forward. You saw that map this morning. That's how marvellously extended it is. The lime green's where there's FOGO now in New South Wales. And education. So the key things that we've learned about the education programmes that have been delivered is that we do really need a long lead in time. And earlier from Lake Macquarie, you have to sort of pave the way for the residents, and at least 4 months before you even start the service to start talking about it's coming. 6 months is good. And people embrace it. There were always challenges around the move to fortnightly red bin. Many, many councils had that particular challenge, but almost every single one of them, after 12 months, it was bedded down. So that was always a challenge. Locally relevant and knowing your community, like what was actually going to work for you, was also really critical, but also working with the processor in terms of what can be received and what can't. Is there going to be a kitchen caddy? What kind of a caddy? Is there going to be a liner? Is it going to be newspapers? Are they going to take pizza boxes? Can they not? So those messages you need to really refine and work out from the outset so that there's a really consistent message when the time comes. And that with all of those in place, then almost without exception in the new FOGO services that we've rolled out, the community has got on board. The contamination rates are slow. Joley will talk about Bega. Clarence Valley is getting less than 0.5%. Less than 1% is not uncommon. We did Kat Heinrich actually did some research for us, the RawTech report, that shows on average that there's about 3% contamination. This was an analysis of all the audits of all the FOGO services ever in New South Wales, not just the ones that we funded. But on average, there's a contamination rate of less than 3%. But this is where the average diversion efficiency was 38%, but with the best bin configuration, which was a fortnightly red bin, small red bin, and a weekly FOGO bin, is an average of 54% efficiency. So there's a way to go there, but it's still pretty good when you consider that yellow bin efficiency is about 63%, and that's been around for 30 years. And this is really quite a new thing. And I agree with so many of the other speakers today that have spoken about this becoming the norm. As this more and more becomes a normal thing that people do, we're going to be able to rapidly increase that sort of levels of efficiency. But the weird behaviours. So part of that analysis showed bin by bin audits, which was the same bin from the same household. And what we found was that 55% of the bins had no waste in them at all, and 87% of the bins had no contamination in them at all, which means that some people are using them really, really well, and some people aren't using them at all. And why aren't they using them at all? So it's that sort of what's actually happening in the kitchen or what's happening in the curbside that we'd like to learn more about. We also did some social research. This was around people's attitudes to yellow bin recycling, but we also asked them a few questions on the green bin services. And this anomalies, this strange sort of thing that's happening, is also reinforced by this particular social research. And this picture, which is a bit hard to see, is that we asked people with a FOGO service what they would do with that plate waste. And 51% said they'd still put it in the red lid bin. So even though they had a FOGO, they're still not doing it. So we know that there are some behavioural and attitudinal kind of anomalies that we need to work for, but we also know that the majority of people do actually know what to do with that, and they are putting it in the bin. It's very confusing, so we want to do some more work on that. What we're planning to do next year and then the next couple of years, and any FOGO council that would be interested in working with us on this one, because I'm calling for volunteers, we want to do a deep dive into those communities to actually find out what's happening at that sort of level, and then also test some interventions. And I'm very interested, around Penrith and Tracy Chalk's comment about the 15% that just won't engage. Why not? How can we get them to engage? I'm sure that we can. But what would make them do it? Or can we not? And if we never can, then let's just focus on the 85% that are going to do it properly. But there's some challenges there, but with good education, for example, like Joley's about to show you, and I'll get off the stage now so that she can, we can really make it work. And even though there are differences in different communities and regional and city, education really is the key to making it work. So with that, I'll hand over to Joley.
Thanks, Amanda. Just by way of some quick background, Bega Council had a garden organic service for 6 years before we introduced the FOGO aspect, the food aspect of FOGO in October last year. And one thing that really altered it in our community was we've got rural residents and what we call urban residents, so they live in a town. So we had approximately, I think about 13,000 households that had a 3-bin service, and then we had another 2,000 rural properties that had a 2-bin service. When we introduced FOGO in October last year, obviously there was no change for those rural residents that had the 2-bin service, but for those residents that were in the urban areas, they went to the fortnightly red bin collection and a weekly collection of FOGO, and prior to that, garden organics was just once a month, so that was the main changes. One thing that was obvious for us was because those curbside collections were going to change, we considered about 12 months before we were going to introduce FOGO, what were the barriers going to be, what were the issues going to be, and one of the main problems we knew was going to be around the changed collection frequencies. So I convinced our mayor, that's our mayor, there in her pyjamas, to help launch the Bega Valley Waste App, which we worked with Impact Apps to develop. And basically, for those who don't use the Waste App, it's got a multitude of benefits, but one of the main functions of the Waste App is the collections calendar. You can set reminders for when your bins are going to be collected and which bins are going to be collected, and that was absolutely paramount when we transitioned across to FOGO last year. So we launched the campaign with the mayor. I literally sent her an email and said, will you put your pyjamas on for this campaign? And she's like, for sure. And that photo there, we actually did it outside of her property, and it was quite early in the morning. It was probably 6:30. All of her neighbours came out in their pyjamas. It was amazing. They had like little velvet smoking pyjamas on, and they looked like Hugh Hefner, some of these characters. And they were all directing her where to stand. They were all directing the photographer as to how to take the photos. But the benefit of that, and it's something I try and do with every aspect of every bit of education, is that I try and get double buy-in. So I built this amazing relationship with the mayor, for starters, and that's, as you all know, if you work in a council, that's invaluable. And I promoted her as a person, and I got to plug the Waste App at the same time. And the main focus for our council, which is, I think, maybe not necessarily our point of difference, but something that I thought was really important, was when you're a council, you're faceless people that are council that make all these stupid decisions. And I worked really hard with the community through my education campaign to let them know that we're actually people, that she's a mum with kids, she's dragging her bin out in her pyjamas, or that I'm a mum, or that I'm a business person, or whatever it may be. But that was the big emphasis. So we were really invested in bringing the community along for the journey. So we created a really simple campaign that was, while it took a reasonable amount of money to produce, we certainly made sure it didn't look like it did, because obviously you can't be seen wasting the community's money. So with this campaign we did Facebook, and this was the highest ever reach and views on council's Facebook page ever. And the comments with regard to the mayor and where it propelled her in our community were amazing. And I think from that point, what basically happened was we didn't have our own Facebook page in council for just waste. We only had a council one, and that made it quite difficult for the waste team to actually comment on things and give people the facts. So from that, we launched our own Facebook page. But as part of this image, we ran a radio campaign, and I'll just play the ad now.
Oh no, the bins!
What?
I forgot the bins! Get out of the way! Oh.
Get the free Bega Valley Waste app for personal reminders to put your bins out and never be seen on the street in your PJs again.
One thing that was important is that councils take themselves very seriously, and you absolutely have to a certain point, but to get that buy-in from the community, we wanted everybody to know that we were just fun, stupid people like the rest of them, basically. So we kind of took the piss out of ourselves a little bit, and the mayor was great in supporting that. So as I mentioned earlier, we didn't have our own Facebook page, and I felt it was really important to start giving the community information that was real. We'd had split trucks in our Shire for 5 years, and every week we were still getting phone calls from community members saying, you're picking up my recycling in the red bin truck. So after 5 years, we were still getting those phone calls. So that was when we decided we had this amazing opportunity to launch our own Facebook page. And to go back to that, not take ourselves too seriously, I was reasonably cheeky with the campaign. And what we did is we promoted in the paper and on social WTF, and exactly that. It's not what you think. And that was the first page of the TV ad, and then when you turn the page, it was about Waste the Facts. And the whole point of that campaign was wherever you saw WTF or Waste the Facts, that you knew it was actually information from council. It wasn't just made-up conspiracy theory about us sending all our recycling to landfill. It was, it was real information. And I was mindful of trying to cut through the plethora of media that's out there, so I wanted it to stand out a little bit. And interestingly, I was worried, although I took the punt, that it would be controversial. We only ever had 2 complaints. One was from one of our directors who said the community's going to hate it, and one from one resident, and that was because we started a Facebook post with WTF when we'd stuff something up, and it did actually mean WTF, but we were trying to be a bit cheeky, and it didn't work. So once we developed Waste the Facts, basically what that enabled us to do is we created all of this consistent branding, and I put a little bit of a marketing spin on everything I've done while I've worked at council. I don't have a marketing background, but I engaged a marketing consultant to help me along the way, and I guess it was because I was mindful of all these little bits of information going out everywhere from council and people not recognising where it was coming from. So I thought, let's put a sort of brand on it. And it made it easier for us as we transitioned into FOGO because we just maintained that branding. The other thing we did is we did a whole series of social and print campaigns that featured all the councillors, and I cannot reiterate enough how important it is to get your councillors on board. If they know you and trust you, they're more than likely going to make a decision in your favour when it comes to recommendations on things you're trying to get across the line. And a classic one of those was when I wanted to introduce FOGO, I went to council with my council report. And I was fortunate that before I had to present, there was a break, and the mayor came and sat down with me, and she's like, "Oh, Joley, I'm worried about going to this fortnightly curbside collection." And I literally said to her, and this is the truth, "I'm going to lock the door and we're going to stay in here until you vote for what we need. You have to trust me on this because it's not going to work without that." And because I'd built that relationship up with her, she trusted me. So we did a lot of... Sorry. Oh, God. Okay, so here's our next radio ad.
Oh, you've got to be kidding. Why didn't you check if the tip was open before we came? It's so easy. There's an app for your phone. Didn't you know Bega Valley has a waste app? It's got all the tip opening times, pick-up days, everything.
All right.
Download the free Bega Valley Waste app and never argue about tip opening times again.
Now I'm going to have to go really fast. When it came to social, we did lots of different stuff. You can see it all on the Bega Valley Waste and Recycling Facebook page. When it came to FOGO, I really wanted buy-in. And the best way, sorry, I'm just going to go through all these metrics, this FOGO branding, was I thought, how can I get buy-in and how can I make some difference? And what I decided to do was make TV ads with local kids. We were going to have 10. We ended up having 50 kids because they were all so darn cute. But the result was we had 500 people that were champions for the cause because they had a vested interest. This is one of the ads. Hopefully it won't take too long to load. And those two are actual council members' kids, and they're not twins, they're just quite close in age. But the benefit was not only, and I'll stop talking as soon as it starts playing, not only did we get radio ads out of this, but we made what we classified as a FOGOmentary. So it was a documentary about why we were doing FOGO. We used the local kids and we used Costa from Gardening Australia, who was awesome, and came down and worked with our council for free. He did not charge us 1 cent. We love Costa, so he is an absolute amazing ambassador. So we made this FOGOmentary and we had that on our social media page. So we've got a Shire of 33,000 people and we've had 15,000 views of our video. So it just goes to show the power of social. I'm mindful of... Yeah, I did.
We need to get smarter with our waste.
FOGO.
Prawn heads, dog poo, stinky cheese, vegetable scraps. You can put it in the FOGO bin. It gets picked up by the truck, so it goes brr, brr. Then it goes into a big pile. You don't put plastic in the FOGO bin. And it turns into Cospos.
Super adorable.
It's no secret that I love compost. And guess what? Now in the Bega Valley, you have FOGO. Everything you put into your green bin gets turned into this valuable stuff. That's why we don't want to put this or this or this in. When we choose the right bin, it's easy. You, me, together. Turning landfill into community-made gold. Be part of the solution with me. Compost rocks!
Okay, so this is some quick stats for you. So we've been operating our FOGO collection since October last year, and apart from a spike over the holiday period, we have a huge influx of holiday makers come to our region. We're sitting at about 0.4% contamination rate, and that has been that way since February. We've only got 1,000 Facebook followers, but our reach quite often is 30,000. We only had 600 phone calls in the first 4 weeks of the campaign, and the majority of those were because people couldn't open the bags. And we knew that we'd already made videos and we thought we'd done enough instruction, and it was really hard to explain to people how to open a bag over the phone because it was, you had to lick your fingers and rub it together, and while there was all these instructions, it was challenging. And the majority of other phone calls were for lost or missed stolen caddies. And most amazingly, we're already at about 29% diversion of MSW from landfill, which has even exceeded my expectations. So whilst I knew it would be good, I had no idea it would be that good. And I think it was recognising that our community were just so ready for change. The benefit of having branding like we have is it's given us the opportunity to maintain that branding for other initiatives, and we've just recently established a fish waste collection at Council's boat ramps, and we've got a separate contractor that picks up the fish waste. We use the same branding, and they're separate, so they're a contractor. They're taking that fish waste and turning it into their own compost, and they're going to use our facility and our bagging equipment to bag the product and sell it to the community. But I guess my main message is don't take it too seriously when you're talking to the community, because as councillors quite often we become quite technical. We don't realise we're doing it, and it is so boring to the community. And you only need to, if you really know your community and talk to them, which is what we did, you get the understanding that they're just disengaged because it's so boring. So make it fun. Make them know that you're actually people, that you're not faceless people behind a screen, that you're actually part of the community, and you're well on your way to having a really successful project. Thanks.